yesterday, Haaretz, the Israeli paper, posted or wrote about this article, this study that was conducted by the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. So this is university done by the university. This the Zionists will say, "Oh, Haaretz, it's so liberals, right?" Nope, they're just reposting what the study found, reporting on it, and you can't count on other Israeli media to do that. So 64% of Israelis see no need for more reporting on Gazan suffering, is what the poll found. Now, we should say that this includes Arab Israelis in this total. So in terms of Jewish Israelis, it's higher than 64% who see no need to cover Gaza's suffering anymore. If we could go to the paragraph, according to the survey conducted by Dr. Boaz Sherki and Lee Aldar, 64% of Israelis believe that the local media's reporting on Gaza has been balanced, and there is no need to present a broader picture regarding the situation of Gaza's civilians. 89% of the people that support the Netanyahu government have that view. But the other question is, if we could scroll down a little bit more here, this is good. 41% of all respondents said that the news on Israel's two mainstream commercial stations, channels 12 and 13, are biased in favor of the population of Gaza. So that is the plurality opinion. But that scroll down even more, because that's insane. But there's even more. Okay, here we go. Actually, no, down a little bit more. Thank you. Here it is. Another question asked in the Accord poll was, to what extent respondents agreed with the statement that there are no innocent people in Gaza? 64% agreed with it to a large extent, describing their agreement as between 4 and 6 on a scale in which 1 is total disagreement and 6 is complete agreement. So this is the top 50th percentile in terms of strength of response. 64% agree with the statement there are no innocent people in Gaza. And then the last piece of the poll that I think is important is on this paragraph. When it comes to Israelis' views of foreign media outlets, which for the purposes of the polling referred to CNN and the BBC, 69% of respondents said they were biased in favor of Palestinians in Gaza. Even when asked about Fox News, which is identified with the American right wing, half of those polled, and 67% of voters for coalition parties, said it was biased in favor of Gazans. I just want people to sit with that for just a second. 69% of overall Israelis think CNN and BBC's coverage, and here in the United States, we're intimately aware with CNN's coverage, and Dana Bash and Jake Tapper pushing the pro-Israel narrative over and over and over again. 69% of Israelis think they're biased in favor of Palestinians, and half of Israelis think Fox News is biased in favor of Palestinians. What do you make of those numbers? What does it say about the West and Israeli society's role in it?
I mean, honestly, there's something refreshing about it, because there isn't this sort of attempt to hide behind a narrative that clearly has no connection with reality. One of the ironic things about that study is that if you were to try to essentially write a news story about that and run it in most of these Western publications that are considered too biased in favor of Palestinians, you either wouldn't get it on the air or you'd get fired for it. It would be considered too inflammatory. And this is true of a lot of stuff that runs in Israeli media and runs plainly without any real controversy. That would be considered far too controversial to run in the Western world. I mean, one way to think about this is, imagine living in Israeli society right now and not holding those views. How incredibly frustrating an experience that must be. This is essentially a viewpoint that is in line with the reality of what is happening. Obviously in the most overt way over the last 20 months, but also over the last 70 plus years. The non-existence of the Palestinian people is central to a particular narrative of Israeli life. And again, if that sounds controversial, fine, but it's in line with the reality of the situation.
It's an
Not
ethno-state
just.
maintained by violence and domination, and some people, a majority of Israeli society wants the violence and domination to continue to maintain the ethnic purity of the state.
And I mean, look, and if all this stuff, makes your viewers or your listeners uncomfortable, fine. Ignore Israel entirely. Name me one colonial outpost in history that was able to maintain its colonial narrative while simultaneously maintaining a narrative in which the indigenous population that had to be displaced or eradicated was of equal value. Their lives were of equal value. It doesn't exist. Certainly does not exist in the United States. It only exists in hindsight. It only exists 100 or 200 years later when, the Obama administration can issue this declaration saying sorry about all the genocide. And, my book is titled what it's titled for a reason, right? Because we're going to get around to that place. We're not there yet. And so to me, first of all, this isn't the first poll of its kind. This is obviously sort of incredibly heightened because of the moment we're in, but there's a very long history of these kinds of opinions being in place, and they sort of have to be, right? There's no way somebody can imply that a situation in which quite literally millions of Palestinians live in open-air prisons, where their every movement is subjected to control by the Israeli military, where they have to carry different ID cards and travel down different roads and take different buses, there's no way somebody can imply that that is an equal landscape from which to build peace. That just doesn't exist. And I think, honestly, it's sort of refreshing to just see that statement outright instead of hearing some State Department spokesperson talk to me about the desire for equal peace and equal justice, as all the while my tax money is funding this incredible glaring asymmetry.
And this is why it has to come from the outside, like it had to do in South Africa and in Rhodesia. And the differences, I think, in those instances are, one, the level of militarization and bombing is not anywhere close. But two, white people were definitely demographic minorities. The anxiety, too, within Israel is the idea that it's more like 50-50 if you were to incorporate Palestinians into official statehood, not just under occupation and control and as third-class citizens that they're now slaughtering. So I guess that's a good way, I think, for us to wrap here. What we're in this place right now. The Mamdani campaign here in New York is very exciting, and he went on TV and he talked about, when being asked about his views about Israel, they said, "Do you believe as a Jewish state that you support it?" And he said he supports it as a state of equal rights. And this is, I think, a really important divergence from liberalism, which has been maintaining this two-state solution myth for longer than my lifetime. And it's so untenable at this point, but our politicians on the national level have completely not caught up to it. Can you speak about the contradiction of liberalism's support for Israel as an ethno-state, especially when you compare it to, like, the multicultural values these same people espouse domestically?
Yeah, I think there's something patently exhausting about trying to maintain a sort of liberal approach to this, because you essentially have to take every other value that you claim to espouse in every other case and carve out a little exception for it. Segregation is wrong, except in this case where it's good and necessary. Apartheid is wrong, except in this case where it's good and necessary. The sort of visceral, emotional, and psychological reaction you feel when you hear about people being forced to take only certain roads, for example, has to be set aside. And over time, that is damaging, right? And I think what you're seeing right now is, at least for the first time in my lifetime, an actual political consequence to this kind of incredibly disjointed mode of liberalism in which you hold on very vocally to a certain set of views and principles, except in one case. If you had told me, 2 years ago that the suffering of the Palestinian people would factor in any way in the results of a US presidential election, I would have thought you were out of your mind. And now it can be argued that at least to a certain extent, this factored in the last presidential election. That means something. There is someone who, maybe he doesn't win, but has a serious shot at becoming mayor of maybe the most important city in the country, who is finally calling out this glaring hypocrisy. Again, if you told me that 2 years ago, I would have thought you're out of your mind. And so what you're watching, I think, is a level of change, but politics, particularly sort of federal politics in this country, is a trailing metric. It takes a very long time to catch up with what the population is thinking, what people are demanding. And so, as sort of heartened as I am by just seeing the most basic acknowledgement and the most rudimentary changes, it is depressing in the sense that I think of, how many bodies between this moment and when we reach political calculus that acknowledges it. Something is changing. It's just changing very, very slowly.
And the Israelis are counting on that. It's why they're killing every journalist that they can find. It's the deadliest conflict. I hate calling it that, but that's the metrics used for journalists in history. And they've killed all the record keepers. They've killed them. And so they want to use this period of darkness, both journalistically and in terms of Gaza's capacity to count the dead and their hospital capacity to kill as many as they can in this period of time where they're doing it in somewhat secret.
I mean, look, the moment a U.S. presidential administration makes the phone call and lets it be known that there's actual consequences to any of this and that it needs to stop, it will stop. I mean, fundamentally, this has happened in the past. This happened under Reagan, very famously. None of this happens without my tax money. None of it. And the second a solution is imposed by the United States, and I use the word imposed very deliberately here, it will come to fruition. But we have had administration after administration, year after year, decade after decade, of some White House or State Department spokesperson coming up to the podium and saying, we're so flustered and frustrated, we don't know what to do. They won't listen to us. And it's patently nonsense. And everybody knows it's nonsense. Everybody knows that the second that there are actual consequences and there's actual pressure to not engage in what is effectively wholesale slaughter, that will all come to an end. It's just a matter of waiting on whether there's enough domestic political pressure such that enough politicians make the calculation that it is in their favor or in their personal interest to consider Palestinians human. We're effectively waiting on that date. Every other argument is an attempt to employ a level of pragmatism and political calculus onto something that, at least to my mind, is as clear a moral issue as has existed in my lifetime.
Absolutely. Well, everybody should read One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This. It's a beautiful book. Omar, thanks so much for your time today. We'll put a link to your book below wherever people are listening to or watching this. Thanks so much. And at majority.fm.
Thank you.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.